thank you very much for having me today. It was particularly interesting hearing that, and it's somewhat of a relief because I think some of the themes that I'm going to be exploring in my presentation from a communications point of view map quite nicely against what Chris has just been saying. So that's a relief. So I'm an associate director at Hill & Knowlton Strategies. We are a PR and communications agency. We're a global agency. We have 85 offices in 49 different countries. And I work in the crisis and issues team. So within our business, we have policy sector areas. We have an energy sector area, we have a health sector area, we have a sports team, we have a retail team. And my team is a service team that sits across those sectors. So as a result, and the nature of my work, I have been involved in such a huge and varied range of different briefs for clients. And when I'm working with clients on preparedness, communication preparedness, procurement and kind of supply chain risks are a big part of that process. Now, when I was looking at the programme for today and thinking about what I was going to talk about, you're going to be hearing from real procurement experts and academics. You're going to be looking at reputation, I think, at some point later in the day from a legal perspective. So what I hope I can bring to the table today is a bit of an introduction to communicating in a crisis. That's my area of expertise, and again, hopefully some of the things that I'm going to explore here will map against what Chris is saying. Again, the diversity of the audience means I'm going to keep it quite broad, but perhaps we can have some discussion a bit later on. So, in my business, we like to make a distinction between an issue and a crisis. Sorry, go for a second. So, in a business, an issue is a smaller scale, contained situation. They tend to be longer term, they tend to be long burning, they're not externally known about at this stage, and they're being managed and only a few people know about. That's an issue. With issues, you have a choice. You can weigh up the pros and cons around what decision you make. You have time to gather and analyse that situation. You've got time to fully assess the situation. You have options. And issues can extend for months. They can even extend for years and decades. Now, a crisis in my industry is characterised by speed, uncertainty, confusion, external pressure, in particular media pressure, and I'm going to talk about the media in this presentation. And importantly, a crisis is a major threat to your business and requires an immediate response. So just to give you a very crude example, issue, you're a food supplier, food manufacturer, you found traces of a particular contaminant, but you know the product hasn't reached your consumers yet. So you have time to speak to your suppliers, you have time to consider the risks, you can recall the product if you think that's necessary, and you can put in safeguards to make sure it doesn't happen again. Crisis, your product has been directly linked to a number of deaths across the country, and people are warning not to consume your product, people are boycotting your organisation, there's a huge social media storm, and there's lots and lots of media on the phone calling you, asking you what the hell's going on. Now, that might seem quite basic, but the reason that distinction is so important in what we do is that issues are often the source of a crisis or forewarning of a crisis. In fact, a lot of my day job involves working with clients on the day-to-day management of smaller scale issues and working out the potential implications and possibility of them developing into crises. The other reason that it's really important is because issues-driven crises are incredibly difficult to manage and are hugely reputationally damaging. So if you think about a crisis like a big physical accident, the general public and external stakeholders will have quite a lot of forgiveness for that sort of situation, at least in its initial stages. But if you're involved in a crisis that looks like the result of bad management, bad decisions, earlier down the line, and I think this feeds into what Chris was saying, that's hugely reputationally damaging. And I think the recent Volkswagen crisis is a pretty good example of a situation where clearly a historical issue had been badly managed, hadn't been escalated in the right way, and nobody had thought about communications around that situation. No one had sort of sat down and had that honest discussion about how to communicate around that issue. Now, for what we try to encourage our clients to do is to have proper procedures in place for identifying issues, escalating issues, and tracking them, and using them as a basis to evaluate risk to the business. This is a Chinese military quote, which I quite like, because I think that this really nicely articulates the fragility of reputation. Business reputation now is so fragile, and there are lots and lots of reasons for that, but for me the biggest reason is the way that people are consuming information these days. And when you're looking at crisis preparedness, particularly around major projects with kind of significant public impact, having someone within your reach who understands how reputation is easily lost and understands how the modern media works is really, really important. And I want to make 3 points about the media. Sorry. I don't think this is the right slide there. Doesn't matter. This is my slide on the modern media. I want to make 3 big points that it's worth everyone being aware of. The first is that we live in a genuinely unrelenting 24-hour news cycle. The news is constantly churning over, it's constantly hungry, and it constantly needs feeding. And the reason why that's important for crisis communications is because if you are in a crisis, you have to respond quickly. Now, that doesn't mean that whatever your response is shouldn't be accurate or should never speculate in a crisis, but you need to say something, and having the confidence to say, we don't know, we're investigating, we're aware of the situation, and we're looking into it, is really, really important. Now, I worked for a global manufacturer a number of years ago who was facing an issue with a particular component which delayed the rollout of that product, and actually in a number of years later led to some safety issues with that product. And I remember having a conversation with the client around, I'm getting phone calls from the media here, and this is of national interest, and you need to be responding to this. And the client said, well, I don't know what to say yet because we don't know what's going on. We're looking into it, we're investigating it, we don't have all the facts. And then I said to the client, well, that's exactly what you should say. Well, you should never speculate, and you may need to be slightly more nuanced in how you articulate that. But having the confidence in a crisis when journalists and media are interested in what's going on to say, we don't know, we're investigating, to buy yourself some time is absolutely fine, and is something that we encourage all of our clients to do. The other thing that's changed in the media in the last few years, it is increasingly competitive. So there is so much news media out there at the minute. We're not just operating in a world of daily, the dailies, hard newspapers. There are online versions of newspapers, there's bloggers, there's online forums, and that kind of wealth of media means that there's huge competition, particularly among younger journalists, to be frank. Now, when you have a situation where there is a huge amount of competition in news media, that can have an effect on the accuracy of reporting. And I know lots of journalists, and I've dealt with lots of journalists, and they're not the kind of horrible mob that people tend to think they are a lot of the time. But speed and competition can lead to inaccuracy. So when you are communicating in a crisis, it's really, really important that you are regularly dealing with inaccuracy. You shouldn't get involved in a recycle of rebuttal with the media because you'll look petty and you'll look like you're out of control. But quickly dealing with inaccuracies is really, really important. And I worked on a particular crisis a few years ago where we had a small team of people who were kind of basically there to phone the Mail online and say, you made another mistake, that's not quite right. It's really, really important that you rebut that kind of inaccuracy. Finally, there is an increasing trust deficit. I think particularly in the UK, I think the UK is a particularly cynical place to be at the minute, and the court of public opinion is harsh. I suppose particularly if you're dealing with major procurement projects that involve huge amounts of money and have huge impacts on the public, late delivery of projects, government overspending, people don't take to that stuff very lightly. And I think the lesson to be learned from a communications perspective is be transparent, be open, and be honest with people, and don't try and shy away from the reality of the situation. I'm just going to go back to that. I just put that up because I want to show you that it's not just me that says these things. That was a survey of businesses, and reputational damage is number one in terms of business risks facing people. Another point about social media, another point I want to make about media is the advent of social media. Now, I'm not sure that the kind of procurement, the kind of processes that you may be interested or may have been involved in have necessarily escalated to that level. But it's still very important to have an understanding of this particular dimension of the modern media. And what social media has done has made the spread of bad news very quick. And again, when you're thinking about crisis preparedness, if you're dealing with a particularly large or controversial project, I think having someone in reach who understands how social media works is a good piece of advice. To give you an example that is sort of roughly based on something true that happened a number of years ago, God forbid there was a major train accident on a new railway line just days after it's up and running, you can be guaranteed that within an hour of that situation, the news media will be reporting on it. They may be drawing on shaky iPhone camera footage of people on site, particularly maybe even inside the train. There will be speculation. The media will be looking for blame. And that will all happen before your organisation has had any chance to assess the situation or look at what may have happened. And what that means is that it's incredibly difficult to control the spread of information. And if you can't control the spread of information and you can't fill that vacuum, other people will. People will speculate, there will be rumour, blame will be sought, and that's before you've had any chance to assess the situation. So social media has really, really changed the game in terms of crisis communications, and it's made my job a lot more difficult. But the same principles of good crisis communications, transparency, honesty, be prepared, be straightforward, say something, even if it's I don't know, all still apply, but it's just accelerated that process in quite a frightening way, to be frank. This is my attempt to be a bit visual. Sorry, I haven't been more visual. But this is I suppose this is the number one thing that I would say to any client in the procurement sector or any other sector is prepare, anticipate, and plan. And this very much chimes with what Chris said earlier. I think it's exactly the same from a communications perspective. Now, most businesses can actually predict a lot of the risk that they face, and they're getting better at doing it. But it is still quite amazing how many organisations have called me just before a crisis is about to hit or mid-crisis, and it's come out that they don't have any preparatory materials in place at all. They don't know what their position on that situation is. They don't know who the hell speaks for the company in that situation. They don't know what their message is. They don't know who's running the crisis, who's in charge of communications, and that's quite frightening. And there is increasingly less excuse to be caught entirely on the back foot, and you don't have to be if you invest in some preparedness. So, in your sector, off the top of my head, there's late delivery, unethical procurement, fraud and corruption, massive overspending. Those are the sorts of things, just off the top of my head, not as a procurement expert, that I would be looking at in terms of mapping risk and thinking about communications. So when you're looking at preparing and your preparedness procedures around how you operationally organise yourself in response to a crisis, make sure that there's a communications aspect to that. So what is your internal and external messaging on those issues? What does your business organisation say in those situations? What's your internal policy on these issues, and are they well known? Who are the audiences that are affected by those risks? Your customers, suppliers, governments, regulators. In procurement crises, you can often see blame between company affected and supplier. So has there been any thought around how you coordinate communication so you're speaking with one voice and you don't have a fragmented group of people all speaking around an issue? Who speaks for the company? Are they trained to deal with different types of audiences? So, you'll have internal stakeholders, you'll have suppliers, you'll have customers, you'll have the media. Do you need several spokespersons? Is one person capable of doing that? These communications aspects need to be built into your operational crisis preparedness. This is a bit of a summary of some of the principles that I've been talking about, but I wanted to put it up there again because these are the things that I think are most important. When you're in a crisis, you need to show that there is leadership. You need to take control, create confidence, and explain what you're doing to put things right. This second point is really, really important because of the way that the modern media is working. You need to be able to respond quickly, even if it's just a holding statement of some sort to say, we don't know, we're investigating, we're aware of the issue, we're looking into it. Being coordinated with your various stakeholders in the time of crisis is really important. So speaking with one voice, because the media, be assured, will be looking to pick individual groups of people off in times of a crisis to get conflicting views, because the media will always try to create conflict in a crisis. Correct speculation quickly. Don't get caught up in a cycle of rebuttal, but be ready to correct inaccuracies. This fifth point is kind of a similar play on the second one, but you're not going to have all of the information that you want. Again, that is the difference between a crisis and an issue. In a crisis, you don't have much time. You have to make decisions without all of the information to hand. You have to be confident saying, we don't know that yet. And be aware that media loves heroes and villains and will always look to try and find someone to blame. So be aware of that dynamic as well when you're preparing your crisis communications. Thank you very much.